said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Mary was conceived without sin, as we know. She is the Immaculate Conception, as she revealed to Bernadette right here at this spot. That was God's gift to Mary, God's favor to her. She was full of grace from the beginning of her life, not because of anything that she accomplished, but because of God's favor to her and the part that God desired for her to play in his plan for your salvation and mine. Mary was conceived without sin. She lived her life then without sin. That was her gift to God. Mary lived without sin, which means that she never broke this great commandment of love. She never failed in her love for God, and she never failed in her love of neighbor. These two commandments, we know, Jesus has made clear, are really two parts of the same reality, two parts of the same truth. They go together, and they are commandments that we are invited to embrace and to live our whole life long. They're not sequential exactly, that we first love God and then we finish loving God and then we love our neighbor, and then that's the end of it. But we go back and forth between the two, or really embrace the two together our whole life long. And Mary gives us the example, really, of how that is to be done. She's the one who has done it perfectly. She started by loving God with great obedience, and we might say acknowledging God as God. Mary, the new Eve, was able to do, chose to do, cooperating with God's grace. Mary, as the new Eve, was able to do what the first Eve did not do when she committed with Adam the original sin. She and Adam decided, for whatever reason, they were tempted to think that God was somehow competing with them, and that it would be possible for them to keep a little bit of their lives away from God and be gods themselves of a portion. They would leave to God some of the big things, the sun, the moon, the stars, the creation. But they were tempted to think that in some part of their life, they would be gods themselves. And so they sinned and failed to love the Lord, their God, with their whole heart, with their whole soul, with their whole mind. This is what Mary was able to do so completely, so perfectly, as we see at the moment of the Annunciation, but then at every moment after that. She embraced the will of God for her, even though it involved things that had never been part of her plan. And she did not hold anything back. She did not say to God, "I will give you almost everything, but I'm going to keep a part of my life, a part of my will, some of my desires, some of my plans for myself, even just a little part of it." But she gave it all to God. She loved God because she recognized that God is God, and she is not. She didn't want to be God, even in a little part of her life. She wanted to be God's favored daughter. And as a result of that complete self-gift to God, she became the mother of the Savior. She cooperated in the plan of God for our salvation. In giving herself completely to God, she made it possible for this great act of love of neighbor to be realized, that love that brings us here today. Mary did not know you and me personally when she gave herself completely to God's plan, but it made it possible for us to share the love of God for her to share the love of God with us, the gift of her Son, Jesus, to whom she introduces us so generously, so lovingly in this place. So we invite the intercession of Mary as we try ourselves. We can't do it perfectly, but we keep trying to embrace this great commandment, this double commandment. And we realize that if we're going to be able to love one another, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love particularly those who are different from ourselves or who present themselves to us in some way as unlovable or unattractive, we're going to bring Jesus to those whom we meet today and every day. We're going to have to imitate Mary in acknowledging the sovereignty of God and giving our lives completely as we can to the will of God. Not saying to God, I'm going to give you almost everything, but I'm going to keep a little of my will, a little of my plan, a little of my desire for myself, and I'll be God of that part of my life. We never say it so explicitly, but that's what happens when we sin. That's what happens when we fail to love God with our whole heart, our whole mind, our whole soul. So we look to the example of Mary, who is our sister in the human family, who was favored by God at the beginning of her life. We have been favored by God now in this new covenant through the sacrifice of the Son of Mary, the Son of God, Jesus, our Savior and our brother. Through the sacrifice and the resurrection of Jesus, we have everything we need, just as Mary did, to give ourselves completely to the will of the Father. So we'll pray for one another as we are on pilgrimage together and ask the powerful intercession of Our Lady, that we might put our trust more completely in the plan of God for us, so that the presence of Jesus might be experienced more fully in our own lives, and that we might understand how to be generous in sharing him with our brothers and sisters.